Okay. I keep reviewing.
I'm trying. Bingo. Oh, that's the concept.
There seems to be in mind.
No, not here.
Are we supposed to be wearing our masks?
Just when you're up close.
Oh, okay, that's us.
And I know I've got kids in school, trying to be more careful. There are little those factors. But I'm just helping you guys out.
Yeah, wires block. Yeah. Oh, gee. I feel like I'm so
Sure.
all those things are accepting. Okay, so
Nope.
No, you're so silent. You have to look down on the goal and you do it, then you can get it.
I can't come up.
Okay.
Mine doesn't work. Can I go home?
That's, just the browser.
Yep. Without having to turn it off.
You can silence it.
You just silence it.
Just right here if you want.
Oh, up here in the. Yeah, okay.
If it's looking down, it'll have a.
You still get everything that you want here.
Yes.
There's something wrong with it. The attachment.
Perfect. Did you guys taste this?
Ready for them.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Jesus, doing too slow.
That's why I do all that work. Yeah.
I bought a good one, I thought, one of the first, what do you call those? Defenders or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Paid $60 for it, was the wrong size. Oh, that's the right one. So I couldn't take it back because it was during COVID, so I got a brand new Defender. I forget what phone it is, like, can't use it on my phone. Not my phone, council phone, but I went and got a cheaper model for like.
Am I ready to roll?
$15. Yeah.
Huh?
You don't have to.
I can't see, I can see it in the picture. It's not on anybody else's computer.
Really been having insurance
I don't
on
know
it, if they get a quote,
Mine is okay.
It was literally like half an hour ago.
Right.
It's in, I mean, it just doesn't show up.
You never know.
This side of it, every for the St. Anne's line, you go up and down that line.
No.
It's got a virus.
Everything else seems to be.
Apple doesn't get viruses.
Yeah.
Which is Walmart, 200 and something dollars.
For what?
Candy. You told me I had to buy.
Yeah, well, it's gonna be your.
I'm gonna mention Tommy's.
Okay.
Because it just seems to be affecting the first attachment. You're not a computer? Oh, right.
That used to say, this is for the kids.
So has anybody got the agenda and all the attachments?
Well,
Yeah.
I got it. I got some highlighted, so.
I'll have a hard copy in 2 minutes.
Anybody want to go back to paper?
Maybe that's why yours.
Third time, we'd be halfway done the agenda.
Is there supposed to be a strategy for homeless? Because mine's not highlighted.
No, there's no attachment.
Oh, okay.
You try it, pick that.
The quality of the Wi-Fi, that might not be a bad idea.
How about we get everybody a printer?
Oh.
My one attachment will move up and down.
Yeah, you know you're using it.
We got some technical problems with the links.
How many attachments total should we open?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Go ahead and click that. Well, I wasn't logged in.
Oh, we left one.
9.
Try again.
Mine?
Yeah, I don't have
I'll
mine.
try.
My Wi-Fi just restarted. So let's see, Sam.
There it is, there it is, it showed up, we're getting it. Getting closer.
You know?
Do you have 10 over there?
I'm a little bit.
I have them, but they don't scroll up and down.
1, 2, 3,
And,
4, 5.
When you pull them up, click on them.
Okay,
I don't have to sign anything.
900 blue.
Okay.
900.
One's red. I have a couple.
I
of
signed
red.
in twice, and the second time.
You guys are allowed.
That's what I said.
Yeah, you gotta think about that.
If you already clicked on them, they change.
Really?
They did recover.
I didn't know
So
that.
you're notifying that you looked.
Right through the wall, or did they turn red?
Yeah, if you clicked on them all, then they'll all go back to
So,
the.
we can see the special items of the.
Can everybody refresh their browser?
No.
Yeah. Oh, that's.
You're never gonna do
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't request if you go to first order.
Mine.
Well, we can proceed. I'm telling you. Okay, is everybody ready? Everybody got agenda and attachments? Not yet, okay. 1 week to go.
Yeah.
Kids. Amy?
Last call for paper.
See, so we can't. No, it's-
Are we rocking now? Okay. Everyone happy on the same page, same word, same paragraph? Okay, I'm gonna call this meeting to order at approximately 5:46, thereabouts. Before we proceed, I'd like to call on Burton to open us up with a prayer. Burton, please.
Lord God, we look to you with thanksgiving for this beautiful day and for this community, for each member and each family, oh God. We pray that you would bless them in their need, oh God, and we pray that by your Holy Spirit, oh God, that you would help our thinking and our deliberations for the agenda before us. And pray your blessing upon chief and council and every need, and just ask in your precious name, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Okay, the agenda for October 29th includes, number one, adoption of agenda. Number two, any declarations on conflict of interest. Number three, we're going to be dealing with visitors, specifically item number 3.1, the gas station and convenience update. Number four, business arising. Then we will go to unfinished business from the last regular council meeting that we didn't quite clean up on Tuesday. And then we have some additional information or items under Director of Operations report. And they are listed there. If there's no questions on the agenda, could I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Ron, a seconder, second by Tyler. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Moving on. Are there any declarations or identification on conflict of interest within the agenda? Yes, Ron.
I may be with 5.3.
5.3.
I'll listen, but I won't vote on it.
Okay. Any other counselors? Elaine?
I think when Robert Reckman presents, should I be declaring conflict?
Only, the way I see it, if there's only something controversial, I think we're only going through a matter of a course of business. There's nothing that impinges wage gain or anything like that. So it's mostly for information, the way I see it. I could be corrected.
No, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, nothing personal.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. Moving on. With the visitors. Okay, JC, you're up to bat.
The presenter here, or was?
I told him you had to stand in the middle.
You're gonna get a little closer to the table there so we can confront you.
There's a free seat up here.
Up here.
Left-handed cheese there.
And you have a briefing note dated October 22nd, and we're going to be reviewing that. And through the course of the briefing note, there is a number of considerations and recommendations, etc. But on that, I'll let JC lead us through.
Congrats everyone for coming out tonight for the gas station update. Sorry for any confusion for last week's agenda. Did submit the briefing note that you do see attached. There are 22 pages. We will go through this and more details. So, congratulations everyone for their new roles and responsibility. Looking forward to the next term. To give you a little bit of update on the gas station project that has been happening for some time now. Attached, you'll see different attachments. I did number them. There's some attachments there from the briefing note that was presented on January 24th, 2020. The minutes that were approved from that meeting as well. A letter from Kimberly Thomas with regards to the structure and then the HST with some options. I had also included the corporation organization questionnaire, a quick budget update, and then some timelines as well. There is a lot more additional information. They can be found at the economic office. Vera Williams has a binder with motions, details of different studies that have happened over the years. Okay. So a little bit of background on the gas station project.
Just before you start, JC, anytime that you want to ask a question as he's going through his presentation, please raise your hand and the chair will recognize that and you can present your questions directly to JC. Okay, go ahead.
Good. So a little bit of background on the gas station project. Some information that I came across, there was something that was presented way back in 2015 with Three Fires Development Corporation with Walk-On Gas Venture and XTR. Just looking into details on the processes for opening a gas station for Walk-On First Nation. Back in 2016, Economic Development Office and Myers, Norris, Penny, which is also known as MNP, they completed an economic leakage study, which showed a little bit more information on how our economy is spending our money outside of the nation. Economic Development Office also completed another study with MNP in 2016. They had a summary report that listed the top 10 opportunities for Walk-On First Nation. And in that study, it actually indicated that a gas station was the top choice. Back in 2016 as well, Chief of Council passed a motion there looking for a profile of all the costs regarding to the gas station project. With that, MNP was asked again in terms of doing another study. This was a feasibility study, which was also updated in 2018. In that study, they identified approximately 10 cents per liter could be saved on fuel. That gave us a strong competitive advantage to operate a gas station on Walpole. November 14, 2017, Chief Council passed a VCR. They were full support establishing a gas station within our community. Then in back in 2019, there was some updates with facilitating getting a project manager and also a business consultant on board with helping open the gas station.
I have a question.
Yes.
So is there anything that happened in 2018?
So my understanding, there was some gaps along the way. There was a position that was not filled, and so there was, unfortunately, a
Nothing?
pause.
Okay.
I just want the bit of a clarification on the timeline there. You see a number of dates here. When did we become aware, I guess, of the Harvey Shagmash venture, I guess, in terms of these timelines?
That's a great question. My understanding, I don't have any notes on that. My understanding, it was presented to Chief and Council.
It was, yeah.
And then at that time, it was declared then that Walpole was also in the works of establishing a gas station. So he was,
I don't recall that.
so this is what I've heard. So I can look into more details for you in terms of when that was brought forward.
Yeah. I'm just having a difficulty, I guess, pinpointing when the feasibility study was concluded here and when the band became knowledgeable that there was already a private venture trying to be established, and knowing that the band project would compete on the same market and perhaps diminish the impact of both businesses, because essentially it's competing for the same market. Or does council feel that's unimportant to understand, I guess, or no?
Maybe he has a comment.
Yes.
So just looking at the council records here, so Harvey presented first in April 2016 to Chief Council, and then again in 2017.
Yeah.
So April 2016 and then January 2017.
But if I recall at the 2016 one, there was no declaration by council that they were putting forward a competing interest. All they did at the time was support him because he was looking for assurances from the band to support his efforts with securing federal funding and Compton Development Corporation. James?
I recall because I was on staff in 2016.
I was here too.
Yes, and we were directed to assist Harvey in
Yep.
securing the funds for the enterprise.
Yeah. But I'm wondering if there was a moment in time when there was prior knowledge of this at Harvey. I think there was. Valerie?
Am I also correct in that feasibility study, they stated that more than 2 gas stations could actually be viable, unlawful? I thought they said 3. I remember hearing that somewhere.
I think that's correct.
That's what I was gonna ask, what was the leakage study and what was the supporting documents? It said how many could it host, because you see Raventown, they have 5.
Yeah.
And they seem, a few of them seem to be doing very well, so.
And, was it 2 in Sarnia or side by side or something?
Yeah.
Right on the corner? But I guess the council wants to look, I guess, or review that information is at your office, maybe the feasibility study and stuff like that.
That's correct.
All right, good. Let's proceed.
So January of this year, it was presented by myself and the business consultant, the new project with the updates of the operating models, financial options and projections, corporate structure, and the construction contracts. In March this year, we had the global pandemic that put a lot of restrictions at all levels, especially with construction and suppliers. And then in May is when Chief Council passed in terms of having the construction recommence this year. So looking at the first attachment, this was brought to Chief Council in January 2020 in terms of the operating models, the capital requirements, funding models, infrastructure, some of the contractors as well. So we went in great detail and presented to Chief Council at that time. Today, what we're looking for is some of the tasks that need to be completed is we are looking to see what Chief Council's stance is on HST.
In terms of the attachments under E, it identifies Claiborne Contracting, Inc. Was the band's tender policy adhered to when that was undertaken?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
So in considerations, I'll go through this. So the HST stance is very important. And we're looking at confirming the funding options, looking at confirmation of the corporate structure. We'll go through either at this meeting or future the questionnaire once the structure is selected. Looking at reestablishing a 1-3-member board until the corporation is finalized. We're looking at, once everything's in place, the development of the financial and HR procedures and partnerships would be drafted. We're looking at hiring and training of board directors and staff. The fiber optic construction is in the works in the connection and services. The petroleum convenience store construction is also in the works. Business consultant is being finalized. Petroleum request for quotes is going to be sent out to 6 suppliers. The supplier agreements will be arranged and put in place for the store. Installation of this new security system, having a third-party engineer for as-built construction reviews with an estimated soft opening for February 2020. And so the first and foremost topic I think we need to establishes the stance of the HST with our new chief and counsel, whether we're going to be collecting or non-collection in remittance of the HST for the business. In January 31st this year, a letter was put together from Kimberly Thomas. With this, it presented two structures: a holding company owned by WIFN with the gas station incorporated underneath, or having a standalone corporation for the gas station owned by WIFN. Option 2 was selected, that had a standalone corporation at that time. In terms of the HST business case for the gas station, was selected for a First Nation model that would not register for HST, nor would it collect or remit HST. An important item that was addressed in this letter was to work with Kim Fullerton, WIFN's legal counsel, on its Aboriginal claim. So that would help strengthen our defense if we were to say reassess with the taxation. At that time, BCR was passed to adopt the First Nation model, and so what that meant is the gas station corporation would not register for HST, nor would it collect or remit HST. With this, we were looking at developing a tax immunity strategy and a tax mitigation strategy for all WIFN-owned businesses.
Any questions? This is a very important part, I guess, in terms of the operation there. It appears that the previous council took an initial stance, I guess, on the HST question. And they've taken a position, a hardline sovereign position, that they would be the tax collector for either government, and that there would be no remittance of the HST. I don't see anything, I guess, in Kimberly's letter or any subsequent First Nation tax expert, I guess, to state to us that if we do not collect the HST remit, does it preclude, I guess, interference by the Canada Revenue Agency in terms of penalizing suppliers, the gas supplier to the ban, they can't remit.
Right. So Kimberly did present at the Chief Council meeting back in January the different options available in terms of if we were not to collect HST, if we were to get assessed, whether to put together like a war chest and have an indemnity for our board of directors as well. And so in terms of like when it comes to suppliers, another thing that she recommended that we could do is also remit on good faith basis. So every so often send the CRA X amount of dollars. So there was a few options that she recommended in terms of, I guess, to protect us or support our decision for the HST.
Okay, let me back up again. But the ban at the time, council at the time rather, made a decision to not collect the HST.
That's correct.
Okay. Tyler?
Okay. So the HST is 10 cents. And I'm just getting the clarification. So the HST adds 10 cents per liter, correct?
Approximately.
Okay. And then there's another tax that's like 14.7 cents.
That's our status provincial portion. So the way, I guess in terms of the fuel has a rack price that is set, say, daily. And so from that rack price, they had the 14.7 provincial tax portion that status individuals do.
That's taken off when we show our card or sign the whatever. Right?
Exactly.
And then the 10 cents
Is HST.
is HST that's just applied to the price per liter, no matter what.
So I guess so you have a rack price, you could have the provincial at 14.7, there's a federal at 10 cents, and then there's a carbon tax at 4.4. And if you times that by the HST to 13%, it works out to be almost 10 cents there. So based on rack price today, it's 45 cents roughly. And so that's where the HST comes in. So what we're looking at doing is not having the HST.
So when we don't have the HST, that lowers our per liter price by 10 cents, roughly 10 cents.
That's correct.
And then that's what everybody pays, so people come onto the reserve as non-indigenous people, and they can buy it at that same price.
Exactly.
And that's what looks good, right?
Well, that's what gives us a competitive advantage.
Okay, so that's why they were going with the no HST model?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If we did have the HST, it does really eat up the bottom line in the sense of, do we operate? Absolutely.
Okay.
If we did have the HST, it does really eat up the bottom line in the sense of, do we operate?
Right. So yeah, so that's just, I thought I understood, but I needed to say it out loud, so that makes me feel a little bit better about what I'm listening to. Thank you.
Great question.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, why are we talking about tax coming into the First Nation? I thought we were tax exempt for any deliveries coming into the First Nation. So, what I'm getting from this lawyer's letter here is that it looks like we're talking about the non-members that come and buy gas here. Are we going to do the tax thing with them? That's what it looks like. So if the federal government is not going to honor our jurisdiction, even within the India Act, to not bother with that, I guess the only thing we can do there, if we chose to, would get a remission order with Revenue Canada for that kind of thing. But I understand that we don't have taxation authority. We haven't entered into that in this community. If we did, we could declare that a tax-free zone. And nobody could bother us that way. So we haven't entered into that process. So I'd still like to hear a little bit more breakdown about from the lawyer as to why that's even an issue, you know, and because I haven't heard her talk about a remission order. I don't want to be bothering with Revenue Canada whatsoever for any of our customers. Anyway, that's fine.
Yeah, I guess you're identifying the distinction in two paths here, I guess. If we play by the rules within the Indian Act and covers a bit on taxation, then to even look at dismissing, I guess, the collection of the HST, we would have to have some type of regime in place to say that we're not going to do that by the authority that's given to us by the, I think it's the First Nation Tax Commission or Taxation Board, whatever it's called now. And we're choosing not to do that. We're taking a solely sovereign First Nation stand and dismissing all the taxation, I guess, that we can possibly get, I guess, in receipt of a fuel supply to the reserve. And then we're looking at still collecting HST from non-members. That's where we're going to get into trouble.
That's where we're trying to get that stance in the sense of not charging HST across the board.
Yeah, I guess the problem with that is how do we apply that type of exemption to people that aren't eligible for that exemption, I guess. You have to be a status Indian, as I understand it, to enjoy a level of tax exemption. Tyler?
So just thinking about, like, when they purchase it on the reserve, isn't that when the exemption happens? Like, it's like cigarettes. They're cheaper because they don't have to pay that type of tax.
That's right, and the retailer, he then sends in those, they used to have these little tickets and stuff like that. Those are sent back, then the retailer would get his money back, I guess, for that, based on the sale, the receipt of the gas on the reserve. Because the way that works is that the gas coming onto the reserve, that is fully taxed. And then when there's a transaction on the reserve, that's when you start to get the exemption. He sends in that form and then he gets his rebate based on that taxable amount. That's the way I understand it works.
Yes, for the status.
For the status, yeah. It appears, I think that we need a full presentation, I think, from Kimberly Thomas to completely walk us through these various scenarios on the taxation, just for the comfort, I guess, of the new council. Although I understand there is on the books a previous motion going and supporting the sovereign approach.
That's correct.
And there's other consequences to that, I guess. What I tried to outline earlier is that there could be a consequence on the supplier himself. If he brings it into our territory, he may be faced with a decision that I can't go there. Because he in turn would face penalties or fines for attempting to supply the First Nation gas, and the First Nation in turn is selling a tax exempt. We'd almost have to have a tax exempt arrangement with the supplier himself. Would we not?
That would certainly help.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd like to have that presentation by Kimberly Thomas as well. Things have changed since I sold gas, but when I sold gas, all that tax was paid prior to me getting it. All I ever did was a little form there for the tax return from the.
And that's how you got your money back.
Yep.
So in Kimberly's presentation, she does outline a little bit in terms of even with the structure of the corporation, being and empowered as well, and help protecting the profits and not paying taxes on that. So so it's not, I guess, in a sense, not just in terms of the sales of the goods, but also the business, how it operates as well.
Yeah. Elaine, then Marcia.
I guess I just have a concern, and maybe I'm not understanding it, but in her letter, item, the second paragraph or third paragraph, it says, number 3, that no First Nation in Canada to date has successfully litigated its position regarding an inherent Aboriginal and treaty right to not register for HST or collect and remit HST. So what do other First Nations do with their gas stations? How do they go about doing it?
James, want to answer that?
So I think what that means is it's untested in the court. So there's the potential.
Maybe specifically with gas lane, but there are cases with other retail operations where they have refused to collect the HSC, and the Canada Revenue Agency has jumped all over them and taken them into extensive litigation over those cases. So we have to go this with our eyes wide open. It really puts us in a situation where we're ultimately going to land up in court. Marcia.
Can we not register for HST but collect it from the non-band members and put it in a kitty?
I believe that's one of the options.
That was what's suggested. So like the 3 different scenarios was to say, collect HST and remit a small amount. The other one would be to collect, if you put a war chest together, and
Right.
have that in effect, in the sense of like, this ever were to go to court, then you have that chest available to defend your treaty rights. Or just straight up remit.
The option I was exploring, I believe I prepared a position paper on it there, is that we get into negotiations with the First Nation Tax Commission to look at ultimately putting in place our own tax regime on the reserve here so that we get the CRA off our back and negotiate with them terms on how we can implement it. One of the beneficial things about that, as opposed to the HST being direct to off-reserve governments, that tax can become a revenue stream back to the First Nation, where we get to enjoy it, as opposed to outside governments, because it's a transaction within our territory. I don't know if you got copies of that within your attachments. Was it sent to, or was it just in mine? There's a position paper on that, the HST one.
From Kimberly's?
No, I prepared. She had sent it as part of her attachments, and I was the author of that.
Oh, no, it's not in this package.
Oh, okay. I thought it was. Maybe you should supply that, because it appears it was entertained at one time at the council level. Marcia.
Do we have any idea of the businesses that are on the island, if they in fact are collecting or from people and remitting, if they've set up with Canada Revenue? Because that's gonna diminish our fees.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell you what transpired that prompted me to develop the position paper. I presented a question to council, should I, at the plaza, when I was the manager there, we have two major or three major tenants over there that are non-Indian, and they pay rent, there's significant amounts of rent. That is a revenue to us. The question that was presented to me by our auditors at the time, that to come in compliance, I guess, with the regulations set up by the Canada Revenue Agency, that we should be charging them HST because they're non-Indian entities. That's what prompted me to put together a discussion paper. Let's explore some options here so that we get that revenue as opposed to directed back onto reserve, because the transaction of business is on reserve back to the local government.
I guess to comment a little bit more on what you're saying about having like our own tax system, and Robert could even speak to this in terms of the First Nations Financial Management Act. I think there's talks in terms of having First Nations administrating their own taxation.
That's right, their own taxation law, you know. The other factors that came into play, and I pointed it out, is that we have other entities that are operating on our territory that there's question marks, I guess, in terms of the collection of HST, and that's the hunting clubs. And those are significant amounts of money with potentially significant amounts of HST attached to that in terms of the lease payments. So, it sounds like we should bring Kimberly in, or somebody that's well equipped, I guess, in First Nation taxation law to give us a good presentation on the various scenarios that have been identified by Kimberly, or a combination of them, to discuss this matter a lot more thoroughly before we proceed. Ron?
I agree that we should bring them back in just for everybody's sake to, I guess, bring them up to speed. She has I don't know if he was working with Kimberly when you were with Three Fires, but it's a guy from formerly Revenue Canada, and he had a lot more insight on this issue. And so I think some of our past council missed some of that presentation, but it was more in depth, and we did talk about implementing our own tax and going under the unceded part. So there was a lot of discussion, and so that's why they picked this option. So again, we have the option again to reconsider this and look at all the implications. I think some of us wanted to challenge, I say us because it's a collective, we want to challenge Canada and say that either we develop our own or this is ours and we're not going to collect yours. So those were the
I like that position, I guess, in terms of going forward and exerting First Nation jurisdiction, but we're going to do this, let's do this with our eyes wide open in terms of the implications. Elaine?
It said a BCR was passed to adopt the First Nations model. So did Walpole already do a BCR with that?
That's the way I read it, yeah.
So my understanding, there was something passed in the past. Now tried digging this up, and I still have somebody working and looking into this to see like where is this BCR? Because like, I don't know if it's as early as the 80s or even as the 2000s. So that's in the works now, trying to get that from the archives.
Amy?
Yeah, so in addition to that, the minutes that you have attached here, January 24th, 2020, they also passed that, again, that position again there after the presentation from Kim and Greg Dobson.
Cody?
Yeah, I'd like to look at it farther too and have the information presented to us all as one, so we can have a better view on things. One of the favorite sayings of my grandfather was, "Give him an inch, they'll take a mile." So, you know, paying tax on First Nations there might open a can of worms, and we might get into something we don't want to get into. So I'd like to see all the information first before I make my decision anyway. So I think that would better off everybody as well.
I guess what concerns me, I guess, in terms of project methodology, is that this question should have been resolved at the get-go as opposed to halfway in. Before you commit $1 million, then you're finally coming to determination on how you're gonna sell your product, you should really do that at the front end, I guess, in terms of getting that position from the First Nation and then implementing, as opposed to making that commitment for, I don't know how much money we've got spent now on the project, and you really haven't resolved the issue, I guess, in terms of are you gonna sell your main product to make your money back?
I guess like I was going off of decision in January of not doing the.
I'm not bringing blame on you.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying, looking at the methodology of the project.
I know also what was
It should have been done back in 2016 when this was done, right?
Yep.
Along with the feasibility study. And I know like JC and the board that came on afterwards to get this up and going, it was after the fact kind of thing that we got on this, just to get it going, or else we we're gonna lose the funding for it. And so we went after and tried to get this going, so.
I guess another solid point that was brought up during this meeting was looking at talks with Kim Fullerton in terms of our rights and our treaties and with the taxation, because I guess there's certain treaties that are in place that may support this a lot more as well, whereas other First Nations may not have that.
Yeah. I guess the other important consideration, I guess, when you look at the framework of the business model, it's carrying a lot of overhead, and it almost needs that 10-cent spread there, I guess, in terms of profit margin to deal with that. Because typically, a gas station off reserve operates with a 2 to 3 cent margin, which is significantly lower. But again, that's why you see a lot of them as self-serve. Jamie?
I think the other important decision point from January was whether or not to utilize the funding from ISC, Economic Development Branch. And is that the correct amount, JC? 742,000?
That would be the ISC dollars.
So those were the ISC dollars. They had been deferred from prior years. And the decision that was made by council at that time was not to accept the ISC grant, with the rationale that there would be a requirement to report to ISC and it could increase the chances of a CRA investigation.
Well, I think on that one, you're not gonna have anywhere to hide, I guess, in terms of whether you accept that grant or not. Yeah, your employees are gonna be, I suspect, requesting employment insurance. They're gonna be submitting SIM cards, and they're gonna see who the employer is.
And apologize if I misrepresented that at all, but there still is the opportunity to utilize those funds, so they were deferred to this year.
Another, I guess that was like the next topic of discussion is the funding options available. But with the HST and the funding, like part of the ISC dollars is following federal regulations as well. And so if we did not HST route, we would be free.
Yeah, I think within those funding agreements, there's specific clauses in them that you will follow the federal rules and regulations governing businesses and the Canada Business Corporation Acts and the appropriate taxation acts, whatever they may be at that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, how do you wish to proceed on this one? Elaine?
Okay, if we get her to come in and talk to us about it, I guess, how far is that gonna put us back on this project?
Well, the critical point is, I see it at this point, is the establishment and hookup with the fiber optic. Once that is hooked up and our pumps, I guess, are delivered, then it sets in motion the requirements for training. And we did identify a potential soft opening towards the end of February, based on everything going smoothly from this point in time.
Exactly.
Yeah. James?
So I do recall that Kimberly had proposed as a next step that meeting with Kim Fullerton and Frank Maness to discuss treaty rights. My feeling is that could be an expensive endeavor, right, to bring those lawyers together on the front end, but that may be why we didn't pursue that meeting.
I guess if you look at that 174,002 for project management, that's a good deal as well. But I'm sure Harvey Shagna couldn't pay that up for to get his role. I don't know, so makes you wonder. Marcia?
So the project can go ahead. This isn't going to delay it with us understanding the tax part of that cost. All the other parts are full steam ahead, or is this stopping it?
Well, it's not fully stopping it. The biggest thing, like if we were to do the full HST model, it changes the whole operation. At the end of the day, that you're operating at a loss.
I think under two scenarios, you operate a loss and you almost are compelled to operate under the sovereign option to make a profit.
Absolutely. So that's where it gives us competitive advantage because unfortunately, we're charging the HST. Your individuals are better off, I guess, buying fuel from their local, whether it be Wallsburg or Sarnia or wherever, because there's no competitive advantage with fuel.
Tyler?
So I think we're all kind of getting at, because I had the same question as Marcia, is we want this to continue because we're already invested in it. Like, it's gonna have to go.
We're up to our necks in it.
Right, so just, being a majority of us new to this, we want to at least see what we're agreeing on again, what is already seems to have been agreed on. So it's just the clarity that really setting us back. And then I think we gotta take one step back to take 2 steps forward, I think, to just hear that. But I think we all agree that we kind of don't want it to be delayed too long, because I do see it as a good opportunity. We just have to see how to make it the best opportunity, right? So I think that's the kind of direction we're thinking through, how I still like to see it open at the end of February, with everything in place. Just how quickly can we make that happen?
So I guess I agree with you to the greater extent there that it does create opportunity, but we don't want to operate a business that does not make money.
I think we should bring the lawyer back to get more clarity on it. If we don't deal with that tax situation, we're just creating a cliff for ourselves, and what's the point? I think we have to identify a strategy or a plan to deal with that tax situation.
Can you frame that into a motion then?
Yeah, we can bring the lawyer Kimberly Thomas, I guess the name is.
Yep.
To come and give us a detailed briefing on break out this letter of January 31st in great detail to the satisfaction of the full council, and also how this sovereign or this First Nation corporation stands alone in practical terms, and I would like in that presentation for us to have concrete options to move on, and with no gray areas. I want to be able to move on something in particular. So anyway, I'll move that.
Second, please. Second by Cody. Question?
Just a comment, can you add that Dobson guy to, because I don't know if he always comes with Kimberly.
Okay.
What's his role?
Greg Dobson, he is the accountant that worked with Kimberly Thomas, who is working with CRA.
Oh yeah, bring that guy in too, because he knows the tax regime. I've had to deal with those guys, so I could have them.
It's been moved and second. All in favor of the motion? That motion is carried. Okay.
Next up is the funding for the gas station. There was discussions in terms of reutilizing the deferred dollars from IC. So
James, didn't we have a proposed solution for that in terms of, there was a couple of conditions or preconditions to receive those funds at 700,000 plus. And one of them was to secure some debt financing from whatever source. They had initially pointed us to, as I understand it, the Tecumseh Development Corporation, because that's the local Aboriginal Capital Corporation serving us, and obviously we go to them for that service to them. But we have discussed it internally, if they're just looking for a loan transaction, that we could handle that intercompany, and I'll let you go through the details on that.
Sure, so I think there's several options. One, depending on the corporate structure, we may separate the convenience store from the retail fuel, in which case we could apply the funds to the gas station. My preference would be to have this conversation with Kimberly Thomas in the room, because I know she will have an opinion on the matter.
Okay.
But I would certainly urge council to find ways to utilize the funds. Thinking more outside the box, we could use it for another business initiative. For example, St. Anne Island Club, if we're able to develop that in time to use those funds. But we are receiving a lot of pressure from ISC to use the funds, and it could jeopardize our ability to apply for economic development funds in the future if we're not able to use them.
I guess what's on balance here, though, is that if we do not hang on to those funds, then we have to look at a commitment that resourcing it through own source revenue.
Correct, that was the decision made in January to use own source revenue for the project, for that portion.
If we release the,
That was the decision that was made. We worked with ISC and deferred them anyway, with the hopes that we would have a solution.
so are we going against a previous resolution of the band that said we're going to send it back, but all of a sudden we made the decision internally to keep it?
We did update council in terms of the fact that we had deferred it to the next year,
Yeah.
and that they were willing to accommodate us if we wanted to use it for a different project.
I see, okay. Now, what I understand, I guess, in terms of the funding agreement, though, there was still a requirement for the use of those funds to engage in debt financing.
That's correct, and they are aware that we may essentially finance it through TCDC or another agency, and we could potentially repay the loan in full the next week, and that would satisfy the terms of it.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I guess like what was presented back in January and approved was the option 3, which is would be the sovereign, which is part of the briefing note on January 24th. You'll see it on the 4th page. Option 3 is showing WIFN's initial contribution amount, which was the 1.175 million. The second contribution is 659,000. So that was taking the previous funding, which is the INAC dollars, along with the 450,000 loan from TCDC, and how it would be used. So we're splitting it between a contribution and as a loan from the gas station to Watt First Nation.
Now, we see you haven't read their new additional funding required. Does that mean these numbers here, they're gonna be jacked up a little bit more, or is it, these are pretty solid, I guess?
Yeah, that's just saying that's what the 659 is, the new funds required to replace the TCDC and the ISC dollars.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what was selected was option 3. Prior to that, as Jake mentioned, like the INAC dollars were used, the TCDC dollars, and then the WIFN contribution. We've updated the capital expenses. That's why you'll see additional dollars from what was originally approved. Let's see here. In prior years, I can recall the exact date. It's like 2018. And since there was some delay in terms of the gas station workload, we updated all the numbers for the new construction contracts, because the cost of construction increasing, and then any sort of items that were missed as well on the previous workload. So that's where these dollars are coming from. So I guess where we're at now is to see where do we move forward in terms of utilizing the ISC dollars, or we're going to continue to be sovereign, or I guess also Kimberly Thomas would be able to discuss a little more detail with this as well.
I guess if we look ahead and we look at the utilization of the ISC dollars based on previous resolution, we would have to rescind that previous resolution? Continue on, Jason.
So I feel based on the motion on number one, with number two, I think that should also be incorporated into the presentation in terms of outlining the options available with the ISC dollars. And that maybe number two just be taken as information. Number three, we're looking at updating the corporate structure. What was previously approved was option B, just have a standalone corporation for the gas station. With discussion with a business consultant, they have recommended another strategy in terms of mitigating any sort of risk is actually incorporating the gas station into two corporation, as you have the petroleum aspect and you have the convenience aspect. So that will help protect in terms of if something unfortunately happened with petroleum, that we could look at having, I guess, that being safeguarded by having funds moved from the petroleum into either the convenience or back in the WIFN to ensure that there's no funds in that corporation with petroleum to protect that corporation. So it's an extra safeguard that can be put in place with
Can I stop with it for a second? Okay, we're operating, it's proposed to operate the gas station under sovereign protection, whatever it's called, tax immunity, et cetera. Now, does this apply to the convenience operation as well?
So yeah, we're looking at having
Tax exempt, exclusive tax exempt sales there as well?
across the board.
Okay, so wouldn't the CRA take the same run as they would at the gas station? So there would be no protection. You'd be faced with two court cases instead of one.
Right.
Okay. Because there would be, as you just mentioned, two separate legal entities, correct?
That was brought up from one of the business consultants in terms of the structure, because originally we were doing the standalone, and then this was presented as another safe measure. But I think now, based on today's conversation, having deeper conversations in terms of safeguarding if CRA were to come in, what does that look like in terms of two court cases and as a whole. And then also a holding corporation was also discussed. And so whether you use an existing corporation such as Three Fires or to establish a brand new holding corporation, that was, I guess, another option. And so what that does in terms of to use an existing corporation with Three Fires, we have something that's already in place. And we can look at what the big picture is, having future businesses that are owned by WIFN and continue growth in that sense.
Carry on.
So I guess with this item here, number three, I think it's fair to say that, again, with Kimberly Thomas and Greg Dobson, is to put the big picture as to what is the best avenue for us and put together a presentation for chief of council when it comes to the HST, the funding, and the corporate structure. And that would carry on into number 4, which is actually doing the documentation for the corporation of setting it up. So that will have to be discussed once decisions are made. Number 5, we're looking at, so we had a 3-member intern board for the project until the corporation was in place. Unfortunately, the corporation did not get in place, and we have a new chief of council, so that ended the board based on our agreement was that the board would dissolve with the new chief of council. So what we're looking into now is reestablishing a 1 to 3 member board for the gas station project until the corporation is in place for another recommendation.
I guess I just had a question. I don't recall ever us discussing or approving a 2-entity type corporation between the convenience store and the gas station. All I recall is the 1. And so I don't know when that changed, so that's got me kind of fuzzy right now. So there's some things in here that I don't quite know when that changed and who changed them, but some of this stuff I don't believe was approved at our board meeting. So that's where I feel a little bit fuzzy or unsure now. So these are concerning to me, so it'll be better when we have Kimberly and company in and explain some of this stuff. I was waiting for you to finish because that's what I wanted to say as well, so much.
No, absolutely. So option B was selected, which was having the standalone corporation just as a whole. And then when I met with the business consultant just last week, they recommended in terms of doing the 2 corporations. So that's what I'm presenting now, I guess, another option that's available. So it has not been confirmed or selected or approved to do 2 corporations.
I guess in the absence of a board, who's approving expenditures?
So there, on January 24th, there was with the budget approval, there were a lot of line items that were already approved.
Okay. And we're following those approvals?
That's correct.
Okay. James, you look
For
real.
any, for any new expenses though, we'll need a board because I rely on that to sign off on items of my.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the regulations, and there's certain limitations that either you or I can sign off and it's not approved, and, or there is approved budget somewhere, and that has to be followed. And if there's any significant changes with that budget, then that would have to come back to the council for amendment or approval.
Right, so there was delegated authority from council on January for me to sign off above my spending authority as long as it was within the approved budget and approved by the board.
And that's over and beyond the existing regulation?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That was my first day on the job.
Sign this. My goodness.
But not to make light of it, but I guess to highlight the fact that for my comfort level, I'd like to see a board in place.
Yeah. And when you say a board, this is for an unincorporated group of people, as opposed to a board of directors, anything that, okay.
Yep, until the incorporation is in place and then.
So they would act as the incorporators then?
Essentially.
Yeah, okay. You know, you have this list here of 1 to 15. Ron made a good point. There's you go through that list there and put in brackets or something, approved by council or something like that, and that's already covered up, or something that's requiring action going forward, I guess, would be a bit helpful. Has there been any work, I guess, I see that coming up on the SOP documents?
So documents for,
Yeah, the SOPs, standard operating procedures?
so that's where we're working with the business consultants on putting in the human resources and financial management.
So on number 6, then, we don't even have an index.
No.
And without that, we can't have job descriptions to do a call for trainees and hiring.
That's correct.
And number 8, we have to look for a finalization date on the completion of the fiber optic.
His goal is at the end of November.
Okay, good. And number 9, we're pretty well completed with the convenience store.
For the most part, there still are some delays with the flooring and then also the refrigeration. There's supplies that, so lighting, for instance, did not operate correctly, so didn't have any in their warehouse here in Canada, so they had to go to the US to have it shipped here. And so that's in process there, I guess.
Is there any COVID delays, I guess, in terms of manufacture with any items?
So there has been, like, I guess, like, quite a bit of delays in terms of whether it be the roofing, there's slight delays there, the refrigeration, there's some delays. The doors and the windows, there's been delays there. The flooring has been pretty good. They got to finish the flooring as well. The security systems, we're waiting for the fiber, where to get that set up. So there has been a fair bit of delays in terms of with COVID. We don't think
It's unfortunate, no?
Absolutely.
Ron, I see you here.
Going back to number 6, on the consideration of development of catching on gas fired convenience, financial, and human resource policies, procedures, and partnerships. When was our last meeting, JC? With me, you, and Steve? I believe it was
I believe it was in August.
was it in August of what, 2019?
No,
Or this year? So I believe at that meeting, you stated that you would be working on that, number 6. And I thought that you would be working with our HR as well to dovetail some of our policies that we already have. And you just stated that they're not completed or nothing, right?
They're not, unfortunately. Because we will be using Kimberly Thomas and also looking at partnerships with WIFN as well.
Okay. Well, I guess to follow up supplementary, when do you think that might happen?
So we were waiting with the business consultant, and so that's being finalized right now in terms of having a business consultant on board with the reference checks, and then we're going to put those in place.
So a month,
So yes, I guess in a sense,
30 days?
I'll say a month.
Okay.
JC, I just have a question. So the business consultant that you're bringing on board is in the budget, right?
That's correct. We had a previous business consultant. However, she terminated her contract in January.
Flew the coop? I guess you could go ahead with number 11.
So with the business consultants, we'll also, we we have 6 suppliers lined up to send out the request for quotes, such as Davis Field was heavily discussed in the past. OT is also discussed, but we also want to reach down the river to say, Shell and Gord.
That
So
makes sense, yeah. Get a quick reference, I guess, on the rack prices and stuff like that.
yeah, absolutely. So we figured that process shouldn't take more than 6 weeks once initiated.
Can you proceed with the convenience store supplier agreements? Or are you waiting for a business consultant?
So with the supplier agreements as well, I guess in a sense too, is like without having the corporation set up too, don't want to be liable for ourselves in a position that we are responsible for, I guess, desk without having any business operating. So some of that has also been involved as well. So that kind of goes in line with petroleum.
What my understanding was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was an amount identified within the project budget for opening costs, I guess in terms of bringing in supplies,
Yep, absolutely.
and operating costs for how many days?
3 months.
3 months, good, okay. Let's move down to 14, the third-party engineer for as-built construction review. You identified a need for that?
Yes, so this was, the business consultant actually recommended this in the sense that having somebody review what has been completed with convenience store and also the petroleum aspect and not just take their word.
Yeah, we might need that for insurance purposes and stuff like that. Somebody stamped on a corner to be sure that it's properly built.
The contractors that we have selected have utilized state engineers as well, but to have that third party review to ensure that we receive the product that we.
We've had some discussion on that. Could you look at the KL Martin Group and Six Nations? They're quite familiar with being on the reserve, working here on reserve in the past.
Absolutely.
And 15, we already discussed that. The soft opening, you can provide some explanation to the council on that, the soft opening.
So soft opening will be more or less, say, opening up to our community, friends, family, kind of just, whether it be, say, depending on how everything goes, if we can, say, open the petroleum up prior to opening the store, then we'll certainly be looking into that as well. But it's basically just testing the road, seeing what's working, what's not working, and tweaking what needs to be tweaked, or adding what needs to be added, or just kind of help in the sense of make sure that everything's operating efficiently. And then we'll be looking into a grand opening, and depending on the whole COVID thing, really determines on how that looks like.
Sounds good. Marcia,
Okay, so JC, what's our time frame in making a decision that's not going to repeat that February 2021 opening?
I will reach out to Kimberly Thomas and Greg Dobson and get them in here as soon as possible. I guess who's the best person to reach out to make the arrangements for scheduling? Is it? And so I'll reach out to them to compile the information that we've discussed today to present, and hopefully we can at that meeting have motions for with the HST funding, the structure, and then get started on the incorporation questionnaire, getting that kind of pre-worked and ready to go. And then I think the incorporation shouldn't take more than 2 weeks to probably incorporate, get all the documents sent in and set up. In the meantime, we'll be working on the policies and everything. So I'm hoping those decisions don't actually delay anything. Is the plan.
here's my suggestion. I guess that you work with the construction firm, whoever you get for the third-party confirmation, I guess, for the as-bills, and to work with the consultant that whoever comes in to formulate and put together a Gantt chart, identifying the identified opening date of, say, February 27th or whatever, Saturday is in late February as your target, and then work backwards, I guess, in terms of the tasks that are required to be completed, and identify those decision points either for the board or that's required by the council as a whole to speed this project along. Ron?
Just one other piece, I guess, since we're talking about the taxation and there was mention of Kim Fullerton, I guess, well, I don't know, I guess we'll need a paper on that if he hasn't already done it, because I thought direction had already been given. I don't know if that's the case or not, so I don't know if we want to do that or not.
Amy?
So I thought they were just gonna have a phone conversation.
I don't know.
My understanding was that Kimberly Thomas just needed to talk with Kim Fullerton, who's our land claims lawyer, to talk about the strength of our original title claim and our unceded territory to assist with the tax mitigation strategy.
Well, however it rolled out, there should have been a letter from either one of them stating what the opinion was.
I'll confirm with Kim and see if she had that conversation.
I'm not sure if they had that conversation, but I do remember receiving an email or some other request to have a formal meeting here with both law firms, and I know that didn't move forward.
Okay. Maybe that should happen. Marcia?
Just looking at some of the policies and procedures and that have to be developed, it may be wise to mirror as closely with the HR policy, because I'm thinking ahead, and the workers are, I'm hoping are going to be 100% First Nations people from this community to give jobs to them. You're going to get into problems if you have different dates, like if they, for bereavement and things like that. They're going to have to mirror almost pretty close to what WIFN policies are. Otherwise, you're going to have angry grandmothers and elders, or why can't my grandson have the day off to do this and that? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so that was actually a great point, because we had that conversation with Kimberly Thomas in terms of developing other brand new policy procedures or using WIFNs, and so we recommend using WIFNs as a guideline in terms of both the HR and financial. So that has been discussed, absolutely.
Okay.
Have you ever considered reaching out to the local development corporation, Three Fires, because they already went through that exercise in terms of putting together a corporate personnel policy, et cetera? They're about 40 yards away. Might eliminate the need to spend another $30,000.
Kimberly's goal was, I think, about 3,000.
Okay. She's gonna pull out one of her templates again, yeah. Elaine?
I just have a question about the convenience store. A lot of community members are questioning what's all, is it just gonna be a basic convenience store, or are they gonna have OLG?
There'll be OLG.
Is there gonna be like a snack area, coffee, and they're asking those kind of questions?
Yep, so there's a little service counter for coffee, Nevada, and then slushy is in the works for, say, down the road. And then there's also going to be a slat wall with all your shelving units, so whether it be automotive accessories to chips to pop to candy, and some of the basic necessities for grocery items as well. There is a 6-door reach-in cooler, and then walk-in cooler, sorry, and a 2-door reach-in freezer as well. Handicap accessible. We did put in a pass-through window. Who knows what, again, with the COVID situation, will we be serving customers through a window? So we made sure that was in place as well.
Did you say washrooms?
Handicap washroom, yeah.
Handicap, okay. And it's self-serve, or are we gonna get the royal treatment where we don't have to get out of the cars in the wind and the rain and sleet?
Yep, full service.
Debit machine?
So we're looking at 3 units for the debit, so having one wireless one for outside, one wired one inside, and then a wireless one that would be floating outside as needed for 2 tenants for the high demand.
Marcia, I'm surprised you didn't ask if there was a points program with the.
I have
Yes.
too many cards now.
Is there gonna be a points program?
And so with the request for points for the fuel for petroleum, we're looking at seeing what they can offer for the rewards as well, or if we should be establishing our own.
Okay. Elaine?
I like that points program though. Is asked, but are we getting, okay, are we getting Indian gas, or are we getting the good gas? That's what the community members have been asking me, and I said, what do you mean? Well, I have a friend in Raventown, there's the gas station that the bank owns, and they get the gas with all the additives in it. And then the other gas station that he took his truck to, something happened to it, and they took it in to get service, and they told him, where are you getting your gas? Because that's the problem. So I don't want to get into a situation where our gas station gets blamed for someone's truck not working right.
So that's a touchy subject, because that was actually one of my questions, was one of the fuel suppliers, the quality of their fuel, because that is a concern. In the sense that if a consumer fills up, then we'll say water down, for instance, or whatever the situation may be. A lot of the fuel suppliers even all the fuel suppliers are governed, they are regulated to have this, whether it be the 87 octane, 89 octane, 91, 93, whatever that quality is, that they should be adhering to those regulations and testing on a regular basis. I have heard of it being human error, unfortunately. Say the fuel truck driver puts the wrong fuel in their tanks, and so when they go to dispense it, and that's where there's been certain issues, I guess, in the sense of people's vehicles. And so ideally, quality fuel, absolutely. The supplier should be adhering to the standards.
Well, I guess you wouldn't have a problem if you got enough concern. Major players, Ron?
That was one of our concerns at the board level as well, so we wanted quality fuel and making sure that there was no water or any other biodegradables in there. And we did suggest up the river. However, don't know where that's at right now, so, and we wanted to act on it in an ASAP manner, but, so, anyways.
Marcia?
Are we selling diesel as well?
Yes.
And are we going to have, where we can exchange our propane tanks in the summer?
So that's also going to be work with the supplier arrangements, because there are 2 main companies for the propane tanks. One company actually takes almost any propane tank, and so it's a matter of pricing the better exchange service.
What type of hours are you operating? I know a lot of duck hunters gotta fly to Wallsburg to go get the fuel at 3 in the morning. A lot of band members work night shifts. It's really hard to stop everything and go to the gas station before the closing time. So being a band run business is just gonna have like a door shut at 5:30 or.
It's a great question. So the original business case was to operate, say, the 6 to 10:30 to help in terms of the ferry hours. The new hours is to be determined, but I can see, again, being, say, something that is early and open later, say 7 to 9. So that's to be confirmed.
You may have to go in seasons, duck hunting season, you're open 24 hours, right? You know,
Yeah, there's no place to get duck stamps at 3 in the morning. Gary's closed, the Oaks used to do it. A lot of hunters are having difficulty trying to get their stamps at certain times. So I think that would be beneficial for everybody if we did it every 24 hours during dark season and Christmas time or whatever. Like, it's pretty tough having to pay that extra tax on the mainland to fill up your boats, your trucks, and all that other stuff.
Absolutely.
Eva?
Are they going to supply E85 flex fuel?
I'll have to get the octane levels, but it's regular premium diesel, and so regular is usually about 87.
So there's a special, like, it's an ethanol gas.
Yeah.
Only certain places you can get it, so a lot of our vehicles are flex fuel, vehicles. And I know that they were cheaper, even in the States to fill up E85. Windsor, I think, and maybe London are the closest that I'm aware of for E85 flex fuel, so just,
I didn't even know that was one. But, yeah, like, I have a flex fuel vehicle, and it's way cheaper. It's and I think it would be a good market, but however, I feel like it's difficult to obtain in Canada. It seems like that's why it's not in many places. You go to the States and it's all over the place. You can go right across down the road, and I can fill up my vehicle for probably 30% cheaper than actual like First Nations prices. But however, it does burn quicker, like you do go through it faster, but it's also cleaner. So it's good for the environment. And it's actually good for your vehicle, it goes to your vehicle.
I'll look into that.
One last question, are we heavily investing into a gas station on fossil fuels when we're merging to electric and battery cars?
That was my next question. We're gonna have plugs there for those electric cars.
Brush off that proposal. Any, Lyle, got his,
all the latest security stuff that's in place. We were open later and I got robbed 4 times. They smashed and then carried in guns and hatchets, and so all the cameras will be up and all everything the latest.
So we have 16 cameras, 4 at the petroleum, 4 around the building, the remainder inside the building. We have, I guess, like to the back of our in safes, so that's in place as well. Security system in terms of the alarms. I've requested an alarm even outside, and so it makes it a bit louder. The police station right down this road helps as well. Lots of lighting, so it'll be well lit as well. So,
The 12 gauge behind the counter.
Feel like those gas stations in and around Detroit, where the clerks are on behind a 2-inch thick glass.
More like this.
That tray comes up there. Any last questions for JC while he's here? I guess we got some follow-up, I guess, in terms of inviting the lawyer and the tax expert down and to make a subsequent presentation. If we could get that done as quickly as possible, I guess, to try and speed this project up, that would certainly help with the decision-making required by council. So if we can act on that rather quickly, that will, again, help us. Thank you, JC. No further questions? Can I have a motion to acknowledge JC's presentation? Moved by Lyle, second by Valerie. All those in favor? That's carried. Jimmy Butch.
see you soon.
I want a quick discussion and to help JC along, to identify 3 members to act as an interim board to assist with the project. Volunteers. Seeing none, you're on your own. Neva's one.
I'll go back to it.
And Ron.
Amy.
So
She tried it once.
I I was originally on the board, but I found I had a conflict when it came to advising council around the closure of the community and the continued work on the gas station. So I stepped back for that reason, because as a board member, you're responsible for the board, and my decision as a board member was completely different from my decision, or from my advice to council as a staff member.
You didn't feel like acting on your own recommendations? Okay, I see the picture.
But you were there from the very beginning, were you not?
Yeah, I'm happy to help as a staff member, but not as an interim board member. I can still provide support from this office, but not as an interim board member.
And I would help with the board as well as, I guess, assistance from the outside, I guess. But I think would be an opportune time to get 3 new people, I guess, involved with that.
Right?
Yeah. I'm in.
Third member is Cody. Just to reiterate, the members are Ron, Cody, and Neva. Motion to that effect. Motion moved by Elaine, second by Tyler. All those in favor? That is carried. You got some help?
You good?
You're welcome. Okay, we can move on to unfinished business. All right. Okay, we're going to switch our agenda over to clean up the regular council meeting of last Tuesday. And we have director's report.
Yeah.
Lead off, James.
So I'm just going to give a verbal update on the homelessness update, and we'll have more formal briefing notes coming to the next council meeting. But 2 items we're looking at. We do have a collaborative working group within community well-being made up of health, community service, and social services, put together a strategy. There is some work we've been doing in this area that we've updated council on in the past, but we're putting some recommendations together with that group. We've been hearing from some of the advocates that have come to council in the past, and we're seeing if there are avenues that we can support either a tiny home or smaller dwelling on private property in some ways. And there are some challenges with that, because we're talking about members that are serviced through OW. That's an inherently short-term project. And so there's some challenges, but we've also heard from other members that could use assistance that are on ODSP, which would be less of a challenge. So we think it's something worth exploring at this time. Again, I'll bring something more formal at the next meeting. And we're also investigating a recent announcement, a large allocation of housing funds from the federal government on an emergency basis. So we will bring some pilot project plans that we had developed over the last year in areas of transitional housing and emergency housing for council's consideration at the next meeting.
Did you mention also the participation of Ontario Works with your?
Yes, Ontario Works is a member of, yeah, thank you for that.
Good. Questions? None? Move on.
One question.
Oh, sorry, Marcia.
So, okay, so you're working on that, when, like, how soon are we going to be able to see something there? Because.
Yes, we will have formal recommendations at the next regular council meeting.
Which is in 2 weeks?
Which is 2 weeks, correct?
First month of.
First month. Reason, I just think it's really.
I guess to address some of your concerns, we're looking at some interim measures, I guess, in terms of looking at the securing some type of military winter tents and stuff like that might be used on an interim basis, but certainly not to put our people back in teepees. We'll treat them a little bit humane than that previously. We'll see what we can do. There's even the possibility of purchasing some trailers and stuff like that to accommodate them even on an interim basis till we decide what we want to, or what we can utilize with a little bit more permanent housing. So we'll explore those there. We're aware that it's getting cold and those people are going to start to suffer. Amy?
Is your next item in camera?
St. Anne Island?
Yeah.
The only reason I wanted this in camera is because I talk about a bid we received in the briefing note. So I think the discussion can be out on camera unless council wants to move in camera for seeing them.
We're live streaming, so
Yeah.
that's my only.
I think as long as I don't speak to the bid in any detail, it should be okay, but.
No names, no numbers.
Okay.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, so the next item, I'll begin with the background and touch briefly on the bid we received in June. We did receive one bid for St. Anne Island Hunt Club that was rejected by council. And that bid had included consideration for significant rent reductions to offset leasehold improvements. And council rejected the bid and indicated that it would like to see WIFN make its own improvements, but no resources were allocated to do so at that time. More recently, we've retained Rob Seal, who have discussion, and he's had a chance to visit the Hunt Club and make some recommendations. He was recently employed by Bradley's, and now he's at two other nearby Hunt Clubs, Rex's and
Mud Creek.
not Mud Creek, but not, begins with a B, it's a French.
More.
Yeah. So what we're focusing on right now is the buildings. And I apologize, but I was hoping to include photos of this, but that didn't happen in time. We did take a number of photos of the buildings, but I'll go over it. The opinion, based on our investigation, is that all of the buildings are in poor condition, with the exception of a large warehouse that's on site that's in fairly good condition. But the residence buildings and the main clubhouse and the boathouses are in very poor condition. And you have structural damage in all of the buildings except for the clubhouse. But the clubhouse is suffering from some mold. So we wanted Rob Seal to make a recommendation based on, is this worth refurbishing in terms of the clubhouse? And his opinion was, it could be refurbished, but the layout is not what you would typically see in a modern clubhouse. It's fairly boxy. It's, I believe, two manufactured buildings that have been put together with a roof built on top on poles. So his recommendation is to remove that as well, and that would free up a number of options for either WIFN or a future leaseholder to make improvements to that piece of the property. And there would also be some necessity to remove fallen and trees that are in poor health as well, that have encroached on the buildings. And a last piece is that the island is part of the servicing of hydro to some of the other islands in Lake St. Clair. And for that reason, we would need to bring Hydro 1 in order to disconnect the buildings as part of the project. They're the only electrical service that can service that piece because of the service they provide to the other islands there. It's also, so we have been in discussions with Walpole Island Ferry to do some of the work in terms of providing the labor. In the current discussions, we wouldn't be using the ferry itself. It was freshly painted, and it seems like it might not be necessary to do that. But we have been negotiating an arrangement where they can provide the labor. So I'm bringing forward a budget. The other piece is they're recommending that the boat launch accessing the Johnston Channel and Romalls be refurbished. There are issues now with the ramp itself. It's very difficult to use because it's softened. So what we're recommending is reinforcing the boat ramp and also creating a dock using steel beams and steel catwalk. So to go over the estimates, and I do believe we might see a surplus in all of these areas, but what we're recommending council do is allocate $40,000 for the ferry, which would include both the labor and the renting of an excavator. And we're looking at approximately 7 people working on this for about 6 weeks. We're also recommending an allocation of $10,000. This is primarily to make sure we have enough money to cover any Hydro 1 work to do the disconnect, but we would also use it for some seawall repair as necessary. And then the final piece is we're recommending an allocation of $17,000 for the cost of refurbishing the Johnston Channel boat launch. So that's based on a quote we received to do that third party. However, if council moves forward on these recommendations, we think that we can do that work in-house at about half the cost, which is what we would attempt to do. But we're still recommending you allocate that, and then that surplus would go against the total balance. And we're recommending this come from one of our hosting agreements with the WIFN Fund. So it's a total cost of $67,000, which would restore most of the area, bring down a number of buildings. So the 6 larger buildings, the 2 boat houses, and one of the sheds that are all not worth recovering, and some other improvements. And the current balance of the Bornish account is $235,000. And the final piece I should add is we also have some recommendations on St. Anne Island North. And so we're currently in discussions with the Gawning Farm, who is working with a firm called BF Environmental, they had worked on with cost for the possibility of planting corn in some areas of the marsh in the past. So we're developing a work plan for that site, but we don't have those costs yet.
Right. In addition to big shooters.
Yeah, so, and we're going to look at a parallel process for big shooters since they've explored planting there in the past as well.
The only point that you didn't mention there, what if there's a need to do some repair to the steel brick wall around?
Yeah, so we don't think that there should be a significant need to do that. So we think we can cover that out of the contingencies. The hydro one will probably be around $5,000. And we think there'll be some surplus in the boat rent costs as well. We could always allocate some more for the seawall.
Okay. Wow.
I'm along with the chief there. The seawall, I think, is in a little more worse shape. You're going to have to redo some digging there, and it is put in to bring the wall back. It is leaning forward towards the channel. There's also, I think, some dredging that's got to be done there. So that's, I don't know what that's going to cost, but that's going to be a significant amount of money.
I guess they call this phase 1.
Yeah.
Lee,
Is the project going to hire any community members outside of any of the businesses that you're already hiring? It's security, it's going to be, you're going to need somebody there all night. I mean, who better than the people who live here know where that marks at the back of their hand? I think you got to start hiring some people in the community instead of I'm bringing in somebody who, okay, this is how we're going to fix it, but it's somebody a different opinion in the community. So, I mean, if you've got somebody in 10, 20 guys that know that marsh, like I said, know what that it used to be like, know where the people are sneaking in that are coming in and destroying that place. Or I think we're going to hire people like that, not just big businesses coming to fix one thing at a time.
just to build on your point, I guess, in terms of looking at other band members. When we first looked at that, my understanding that we were going to use the ferry, I guess, for the transport of goods and fill and stuff like that. It seems to have taken a little bit different twist here, I guess, in terms of only offering the employment to people that already have jobs and stuff like that. My question is, do they already have coverage in COVID or other sources of revenue to take care of their needs? Would it be more beneficial to open it up to other band members that are not already employed and would be seeking some type of employment?
So that's a good point. And there's always the possibility of allocating those dollars and we could proceed with the project without the involvement of Waffle Island Ferry. I mean, the advantage of this is in some ways we're leveraging the ferry manager to help coordinate that piece of the project, but we could look at other ways of doing it with that fund.
You still get the complaints from the people who have said, how come it's always somebody else? We're the people that live here. We know this place, whenever something happens here like that, it's always the people who are sitting on the outside wondering how come they never got the opportunity or a shot to out there. And like I said, big companies can, they can come in and fix a problem right away, but you always forget about the little people that live here. But I mean, that, like I said, security, I seen that place. I see, those are people coming off from reserve and busting that place up. But you can do all the fixing you want, but if you don't have somebody there that's gonna be watching that place toward all the time, it's gonna go right back to what it was, in my opinion.
So definitely, the intention is the labor component would be all members, and we would try to find a way to do the boat ramp in-house as well, and it would be all members in the network as well.
Members without the jobs already?
And that's a good point. So, at the pleasure of council, we can look at another way of doing it other than the fair.
So this project right now is just to clear the areas where the existing buildings are not good and just get the grounds in shape, so it's not like rebuilding right now, right?
Correct.
So for security purposes, what Class is talking about is, getting all of that area back into shape, but would it also include, some signage around that this property is managed by, the Canton, you're in our territories, and also, we put up some other signage too around getting licenses and things like that. Wondering if that could be included in this part to establish that for that area. And also maybe taking a similar course to look at, big shooters, and how to fix that up as well and look at the state of the buildings there. Since we were talking about that just the other day, I think, you know, if we're working on this, we can get working on it further.
In terms of the signs, absolutely. If it's okay to jump from big shooters briefly.
Briefly.
We do plan on having an engineer assess that in the near future as well, so we can bring some recommendations to council.
Cody?
Yeah, I was wondering if, has any of this been broadcasted to our community for bids? I'd like to see that's what a lot of our community members are concerned about, is a lot of the non-band members working on it. And, you know, we're trying to feed our families, we're looked at as a poor community as it is. So I'd like to see, you know, a couple bids from our own band members, putting them in there for design for the clubhouse and for the work of the clubhouse. I'm sure Rob Steele's a very reputable guy, but as it looks to me, he's taking a lot of work away from our band.
And Rob, we're paying him a very reasonable rate just to make some recommendations.
Yeah.
On a per day basis. So, in terms of this work, we could bid for it. Oh, we certainly would, once we get to the stage of rebuilding clubs and that sort of thing. And he doesn't have any involvement as a project manager, and I think he wants to make that clear, because he is a part-time manager for the other clubs in the area. So we're paying him a very meager rate.
And also I see the cornfield here, part of the marketing turned into a cornfield. As a lot of duck hunters know, here, our cornfields get flipped right over. As soon as they're harvested, they get flipped over, and all you see is mud. That promotes the ducks to go off to the mainland. That promotes a lot of the shotgun hunters to take our birds. That's why a lot of our waterfowl industry is falling, because the hunters or the farmers are not working with the hunters. Every one of our fields are flipped over. The birds, they can't eat there, they can't rest there, they just fly right over. So that's a big issue, is if they're gonna put cornfield there, they should harvest the product, maybe flood that cornfield again and create sanctuaries. It's just my way of looking at things.
I think Lyle wanted to get in.
There is a Jason Ford Sanctuary is gonna be refurbished. We've already got an excellent crop of corn in there that's gonna be flooded. That should keep some ducks around. There's plans on taking them more through there and knocking some of that corn down when it's flooded, before it's flooded. So there'll be a lot of feed available there, and that should attract a lot of birds, birds on the
James and Ron.
And I agree, Cody, so certainly we'd be looking at doing it in a way where it supports the duck population, so flooding it rather than just knocking it down and cultivating, so it would be a different process, and we're having that discussion, so it'll be different than the other corn restriction.
Good. Ron?
And as I recall too, if you do that, you'll have to do an EA on that, turning that marsh into cornfield, because you have to see, and maybe we could do it in-house. through our own heritage, see what plants or species that are in that area that you're gonna turn over to farm.
Well, seeing as Marsh has the majority of our cattails, which are pretty elusive now with this new fragmity grass coming in and choking out everything. So any little bit to do with that marsh is jeopardizing traditional plants that were here before us.
We'll certainly take that into consideration, correct? The only little twist I wanted to put on this, one is that some understanding it's a phase one, more or less a demolition, I guess, of whatever we got left out there in terms of old buildings, et cetera. I understand some of it's got mold on it now, and there's fantastic holes in the roof there. You can do stargazing there and watch the plants go by. But the other consideration I want you to look at, I guess, in terms of the function of that particular point of land or that spot there is also to look at a fishing station to support the activities of our local commercial fishers. We do have some that venture out into the lake there, and we should look at in terms of providing some type of assistance, whether it's shelter or harbor, safe harbor, et cetera, because there is some harbor in there in terms of the canal that comes in there, and look at perhaps utilizing it year round, like in the summertime, that it'd be utilized fully for to support our commercial fishing activities. Our boys that are out there now, they get harassed and they don't have any safe harbor to go to. As well, we could have support personnel and people out there 24 hours year round, I guess, in terms of security that somebody pointed out here, I believe it was Lee there, and that puts a little bit more security on our asset up there. We've been pretty negligent in the past, I guess, in terms of not even putting up no trespassing signs out there. So let's pull up our boots, I guess, in terms of more signage and security out there, more presence, I guess is what I'm looking at, more activity. And we can do two things. We can support our Aboriginal right to duck hunt, as well as our Aboriginal right to fish and support our commercial fishing, because I believe there's an opportunity to support them, that they really need a hand. They have very small boats and they put themselves in jeopardy every time they go out. And anything we can do to provide programming or dollars in terms of getting larger boats and better nets and to get more competitive in the marketplace, it's all better in terms of job creation and them supporting their families. Ron?
I guess just for the security purposes, some of the places used to have caretakers.
Yeah.
And they would patrol the marsh or stay in the shacks there, and that would also do a double function of, if there's somebody at risk, you have either marine radios or something there where they could call in for those people that are out in the lake, and they need to go search for them real quick, or they can get there if there's a storm or whatever.
That's right. And I guess dovetailing with that is our need to also to look very thoroughly, I guess, in terms of you go forward with our policing agreement, that there's a component in there for not only resource protection, but let's upscale that. Let's call them rangers or something like a conservation rangers that have some authority to enforce our laws and to hand out fines when they see infractions within our territories and within our waters. And I think we don't put enough backing and meat behind our presence out there, and it's time to exert our authority there and to start policing it with the intent that this is our land and that we want to protect it, and that we're going to manage it under our own terms. And if you don't abide by those rules and regulations, then you're going to be subject to our laws and our fines. Levi?
So in utilizing the staff from the ferry crew, are they, have they been talked about this or talked with about this, because it's changing their job description or including under other duties maybe this work? And how will that go over?
It's in process right now with Lauren for us going that, trying to keep the guys working. There's not enough to do with the ferries down right now, it's down, and we're occasionally out for our farmers and stuff, but there's guys, he needs to put more hours in than what they get on unemployment, so we try to keep that ways going. And this would fill in that area.
But at the same time, I hear Lee's point, I guess, in terms of opening up opportunity to other band members and providing them with an opportunity to,
And I'm more familiar with the marsh. Like I said, those guys know how to work the ferry, but do they know how to walk around in the marsh? Do they know how to cut the weeds the way it's supposed to, you know? There is, you do have to have some knowledge of the marsh in order to go work in one. Like I said, you can run a ferry, you put a line on a dock or whatever, but if you don't know how to run a small outboard and the safety procedures and all that, you can get hurt, you can get killed up there if you don't know what you're doing.
go ahead, James and Mike.
So I don't foresee this crew being involved in the marsh restoration. So I don't know if that satisfies you. So it'd be limited to the demolition, and then we can definitely look at ways to make sure that members are involved in that portion as well.
Wild and Marcia.
I would just say that the first stage would be taking care of what we have to take care of, preserving the grass out there. But as far as Lee's point, that's exactly right. We had running backs when the Detroit Lions come out, they couldn't keep their waders from filling up, falling down all the time. So you gotta know how to walk in a marsh. You would have somebody skilled.
No, Marcia?
I just had a concern because you mentioned mold. Every time there's somebody, people working around mold, there's a health issue. So that really needs to be investigated, like how bad it is, and we're gonna send people out there without proper breathing or whatever, things that they need.
So I agree. So we can look into those precautions before we move forward.
Any further questions, so we can wrap this up? Okay, can we have a motion to first acknowledge the report made by the Director of Operations? Is that your complete report?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, there are
A couple more items.
items.
On this component, can we have a motion to approve of the budget as presented and outlined with the sources identified by James in the neighborhood of 67?
Correct.
$67,000 to come from the one component of the,
Board and hosting.
there it is, okay. Can I have a mover to that effect? Valerie? Second, Neva, all those in favor? That motion is carried.
Conflict.
Oh, conflict over here, we have a ferryman. Okay. Very good.
We have a ferry.
Okay, let's take a quick 10-minute break, just 10 minutes, get something to drink, and we'll conclude our agenda.
I have more place to go.
Your house is trustee of it.
Okay, just clarify.
Yep. Some financial recs?
Yeah,
They're on your computer.
doesn't doubt me.
Send or show me how to open.
Okay.
I just want to make sure those, signing authority position, or in the financial ones. And if they are, we just have to amend
Just have to amend the,
the amounts, right?
that's right, yeah.
Where's that? I can't remember.
So it's scheduled.
Not even start from scratch. And it's like all gravel on it.
Yeah. You're on the 30, oh, another game, yeah. That was live. This one is,
So that's what it.
And it's P.
So for that one, I know Kathy wanted the bus spend $45,000. Kathy's a 10.
So it's.
So the other thing I think we need to make clear is that this isn't the authority to spend $50,000.
Yes.
It just gives you the authority to authorize that expenditure.
Or things
By
that
7
are
o'clock.
already approved in the budget.
They're already,
Yeah.
yeah, you can make that clear, so it prevents us from having to bring spending into the council twice.
Chocolate bars back in.
There's subs back there too.
I had supper. I had supper this time.
You actually made it.
Without the pork chop getting thrown at me.
You must be getting good at ducking by now though.
Yeah. Did you manage to get home?
I did, yes.
Okay, good, yeah.
Hey, I went to the dump today. I was like, our recycling's
Yeah,
back.
I know, I went there yesterday and I was gonna text you right after I got there and I go, hey, they're here.
I know, so I'm gonna start recycling again.
Yeah, so I've been, but because there was no bins there, I just threw them in there. But this time, when I seen it, I said, oh shoot, good, I'm gonna put them in there. Because I usually recycle all my paper and cans and
Plastic.
plastic.
Oh my
and,
gosh.
Yeah. Maybe that should be on Blue Jays. That should be on the community, news, that recycling back.
What was it?
Yeah. I just went there the other day and people can start, recycling again.
Is there recycling now?
Pardon?
Is there recycling?
Yeah, there's, bins out there again at the dump.
Okay, I can post some.
Yeah, that would be good for community to know, but I don't know when they got there. When did that recycling be that?
Did they go out?
Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll post something tomorrow.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that way people know, because they haven't been there for about 4 or 5 months.
Isha has a big bag of cans in her office.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, she's been waiting.
I didn't do that, I have to throw mine away, I wouldn't have no place to store them.
So what are you dressing up for the Trump giveaway?
That's a good question.
Were you running out of time?
Right. Do you have one picked out?
Well, I thought I'd go as Elvis or Roy Orbison.
There you go.
No, I don't.
Maybe Slash.
Or what was that group who went and saw that one, we went to Oklahoma there, and they had Slipknot. Slipknot, yeah. That's pretty, weird, isn't it? I thank you for inviting me, but it was just a little out of my
Right,
taste. Don't forget to mention, the concerns, I guess, about the employee pension there and,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
and then we gotta get the camera in as well.
James, when did we get recycling back?
We're going to have to tender out our garbage and recycling and go with a new company. What is this company? Oh, you have an update?
Apparently, they're back there.
Oh, really?
They're back, yeah.
Okay.
They would just get put back into the contract replacement.
I think.
You signed a recycling contract?
No.
Okay. That's what I was like, maybe
So
somebody
I'm
just
just
put them
wondering if
back
it's
there.
our.
I don't know, they're there.
That has decided to restart the second.
Okay. Well, must be.
But I thought our contract was.
Yeah, we should review that. Maybe we're just hoping we don't notice.
Yeah, maybe somebody just put them there.
It's
They're,
still-
they're just trying to get
Yeah,
stop,
somebody's
stop harassing them.
Because I don't know where they have the big rolling ones.
Yeah.
I can't remember what municipality was, but maybe something like that.
Is there a local municipality that has them?
Derek, did you get something to eat? There's some subs back there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Derek, do you turn the sound off during breaks? Do you mute it? Because I kind of heard last time it was on during break.
Are we, still online?
I'm surprised you muted it.
As I'm shouting into it.
Everyone's gonna know what Chaz is gonna dress up like.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a sheet.
No, you're gonna be the scarecrow. Somebody else is gonna be the color blue.
They probably think this is the best part.
Quick, tune in.
Yeah, yeah.
Tune in, did you hear?